everyone. I would like to lead everyone in the opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this time together as family and friends to gather to honor Carl and celebrate his life, Lord. We just ask that you would give us a fresh outpouring of your Holy Spirit and that you would fill this room with your holy presence, Lord. And that, Holy Spirit, you would comfort those that are still grieving, Lord. But help our words and our testimonies to reflect a life well lived, Lord, and help our words to honor Carl. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. This is a time where we're here to really reflect on his life and the impact that he's made on you, and kind of go from there. So a lot of this time is going to be about how he just impacts your lives and things of that nature, and for all of us. And so right now I want to bring up James to actually to do the eulogy and go from there.
So it truly is a great honor to be celebrating Carl's life today. For those that don't know me, my name is James Beeson. My wife and myself lived next door to Carl and Pauline for a little over 15 years. It is with a heavy heart, but still filled with joy, to tell you about Carl, my very special friend, also known as Mr. B. Carl touched many lives, young and old.
Yeah.
He had a great heart, was loving in nature, compassionate and kind, and had a great sense of humor. From the first day I met him, while my wife and I were house hunting, I could tell he was a genuine and sincere guy, a very social, a very happy man. Carl was a lifelong Dallas Cowboys football fan and San Francisco Giants baseball fan. I will always remember his love of sports, and especially how he loved the Dallas Cowboys. He was the one that got me interested in football. He taught me the rules of the game. From that point on, I was hooked and became a fan. Occasionally, when a touchdown was scored, and this is my favorite expression that he would say, TD or not TD. If consumption could be done about it, a cough, a cough. To this day, he never told me what that meant, or whatever it meant, but it was special to me that he would say that. We would also enjoy stupid plays or bloopers that ESPN would play during their segments of, "Come on, man." That, for those who don't follow sports, it's like the dumbest plays in football during the game. That's what they highlight. Even though watching these games is different now without Carl, I can still hear his voice. If sports weren't on, you could count on him watching an old Western movie. He loved watching television, especially the shows on ABC. The TV was on 90% of the time on that channel at his house. He was a lucky person when it came to playing the lottery, and sometimes winning too. His favorites were scratch-off tickets, daily lottery drawings, and horse racing. Maybe his good luck came from being born the day after St. Patrick's Day. He always dreamt of what he would do if he won big. I'll remember his love of youth and the stories about the kids he coached. His face would light up with enthusiasm and excitement every time he would talk about that. He always encouraged kids to participate in sports. He loved teaching, coaching, refereeing, and was involved in local community athletics, especially the Rose Tree Colts football team and Little League baseball. He founded the Media Boys and Girls Club, which could have been a result of him losing his mother at an early age. Kids and animals were naturally attracted to him. He told many a story about his dog, Ty. The most memorable story he told me about Ty was one day when he came home from work, Ty actually body slammed him to the ground. And Carl, from what I heard, was just laughing the whole time. He also enjoyed gardening and feeding deer corn when he lived at Hunt Club. When his granddaughter, Elena, lived with him in Media, she would go outside excitedly every morning to check the strawberries and watch the ones she wanted. She watched them like a hawk. One morning, she was devastated that the chipmunks took the ones she had claimed. He said he couldn't console her, and every time he saw strawberries, he laughed and would retell the story. I've heard the story 1,000 times, well, I'm now telling it probably 1,001, but laughed about it too every time. When Tammy and I were at work, he would let our dogs out on summer afternoons. They would keep him company. He was always amazed at how well they protected my property while he sat outside, enjoying the warmth of the sun, watching the birds, squirrels, and teaching our dogs to sit and be obedient. He was very good with dogs in particular. We enjoyed several meals together, mostly at Mexican restaurants. You could count on him ordering traditional chicken enchiladas with refried beans and rice, along with a glass, maybe two, of white Zinfandel. He never wavered from that meal. And if the meal was absolutely delicious, at the end of it, he would say, "That was on the money." That was perfect, as he would like to say. He also taught me that eating spicy food helps prevent you from getting a cold, especially during the winter months. We always had good times and conversation. He was always looking for ways to improve daily living, and it was important for him to maintain things around the house. He was a hard-working man, even in retirement. He built an octagonal deck off the rear of the house. Carl even helped us build our 84 lumber shed kit and was the foreman for the project. When it was delivered, it really was just a pallet of raw wood, shingles, and nails when it was delivered into our driveway with no instructions at all, none. It took about 8 weekends from start to finish to get it built. It got comical, especially when it started raining. We had to get him a director's chair, set tarps up, keep him warm and comfortable and dry. We needed him to stick around and we weren't going to quit. He had the tenacity of always getting things done without hesitation. He was lovingly patient and wanted us to learn how to do it the right way. He said the shed would withstand the strongest of storms. It's been about 10 years now, maybe longer, and it's still standing. He also coached me on running electricity to the shed. On another note, when our kitchen was being remodeled, the wall was open that separated our kitchen from our bathroom. He had the bright idea to run additional outlets into our bathroom, which I took care of doing. We only had one outlet in the bathroom, and it was a constant battle of what was being used. Usually it looked like a potential fire hazard. To this day, it is very safe, convenient, and we thank him especially for that. On another note, he loved his red Nissan pickup truck. When he stopped driving a few years back, I bought it from him. We bought it for hauling things and for doing things around the house. But really, we wanted him to feel that his truck was still around for him. Eventually, when it came time for me to get a new set of wheels, I got another red Nissan pickup truck, of which is sitting outside, which he enjoyed seeing every time I visited him at the nursing home. I think it reminded him of his good old days. Most of all, I will remember him as a mentor who early on helped me shape my values and give me confidence. He treated me as if I were his own son. His laughter was infectious. Once he started laughing, he would make everyone laugh. I've never laughed so much, and his humor was contagious. He always seemed to have a smile on his face. The memories that he's left for us, for all of us to keep, is a blessing. For all that knew him, we will forever be grateful that our paths crossed. Mr. B, rest in peace, my friend. Please know that this is not goodbye, but rather, see you soon. Godspeed.
One of the things, I spent a lot of time traveling around the country, and which meant that at a certain point I could not be there with my father a lot. But James took that place. And the things that I would have done, sit around and watch football games with him, do all those things, he did. And truly, my dad did look at you as a son. And I do look at you as a brother. And I really appreciate the time that you actually spent with him. Thank you so much. We're going to begin with family remembrances. And I would like to start with my youngest sister, Cynthia Laham, to come up. It's time. Let's see if I can do this right.
Thank you. I always remember Carl. There was never a time in my life that he was not a part of it. My earliest memories are of this bigger-than-life man on the basketball court at the boys' club or out on the field when my little brothers were playing sports. And as we moved on, his role in my life changed. He became a family friend that showed up Sunday nights for dinner, and he was that adult that always had a kind word for me. Then we ended up in the restaurant together, and I remember being a pre-adolescent and spilling my first tray of food, and he was the one who consoled me. He was the one who said, it's okay, we make mistakes, and mistakes are how we learn. And then when I was a teenager, he became my dad, my second dad. I was blessed to have had two fathers. And Carl came into my life when I really needed a dad. It's hard to say in a few short words how much he means to me, how much he has meant in my life, what a difference he has made for me. But I want to share just a few stories to give you an idea of the qualities that he embodied for me. The first quality is caring. He was so caring that I would come home from school crying my eyes out, and he was the one who would sit down, he would stop whatever he was doing, and he would just listen to me. And it didn't matter what was going on. It didn't matter what kind of problems I was having. He would just stop. Sometimes I would even interrupt him watching football. And he would turn away from the TV and just listen to me, even though that was something that was very important to him. He was the kind of guy who always had a word of advice and always had a word of encouragement. Now, I was pretty naive as a kid, and I didn't understand racism, and I would come crying home about, how the girls were ostracizing me because something happened and I wasn't acceptable anymore. And he would say to me, Cindy, don't let the turkeys get you down. And this was his comment, and he must have said that to me 1,000 times for about 4 or 5 years. Another quality that he embodied for me was tolerance. When I started dating, I must have been 16 years old. The first time a boy that I kissed behind the bleachers, I thought this boy was going to ask me to the dance. And he said, oh no, I can't ask you. And I didn't understand. I didn't understand that somehow I was stigmatized because of my family. And I went home crying to him, and he took me in his arms, and he just said, he laughed, and he said, that boy is not good enough for you. Don't let the turkeys get you down. And he taught me tolerance. We had a little game we played where I would go be in the bathroom anytime I had a date, and I would wait. And I would wait to see if that boy was brave enough to come and knock on my door. And if the boy didn't knock on my door, I didn't go on that date. And I remember the first time a boy came through the door when I was 17 and shook his hand and looked him in the eyes and said, nice to meet you. And he gave me the biggest grin, and then behind the guy's back, he gave me a thumbs up. I dated that guy for 2 years. And Carl was just very matter-of-fact about the whole thing. He never let it bother him at all. And he taught me not to let it bother me. He taught me that character is what counts. And his character was just amazing. The third quality that he embodied for me was generosity. I grew up, I got married, I had a baby, I was 22 years old, and I was living in North Philadelphia, and my husband had gone off to California, and I was alone, and something happened, and I got ill, and I had to go to the hospital. And I remember being in the hospital and saying to my mom, "Oh my God, what about my car?" And she said, "Don't worry about that. Carl took care of that." And then a couple months went by, and I got well, and I called them up. I was living in LA at the time. I moved to LA to be with my husband, and I called them up in a panic, and I said, "What about those hospital bills? Did you get that hospital bill?" And my mother said, "Don't worry about it. Carl took care of that." And I thought, "What?" And she said, "He never took you off of his insurance. We filled out the hospital paperwork ourselves, and you're just covered." And I couldn't believe it. I was flabbergasted. And I said, "Well, what about the ambulance bill? I'm sure the insurance didn't cover the ambulance." And she said, "Don't worry about it. Honey, Carl took care of it." And this is the kind of man that Carl Boston was. He would have given me the shirt off his back if I had needed it. And I think there are times when I was cold and he actually did. Carl Boston was my dad in every way but DNA. And when he was nearing his end, I was able to come and be with him. I loaded up everything into a storage unit, packed up my car, and drove across the country. And I feel so blessed that I got to spend the last year of his life being close with him and laughing and joking. And you know what? That man's sense of humor never wavered. No matter how uncomfortable he was, or grouchy, or tired of being in that old nursing home, he could still tell a joke and crack up at that joke. And his sense of humor is something that I will just never forget. Along with all the other qualities that he embodied, he was able to laugh at life. And one of the main things that he did for me was he taught me how to laugh at myself. Because I took myself really seriously, and Carl just wasn't able to take anything too seriously. He was very practical. So he taught me how to laugh at myself. And the very last thing that happened for me, where I really felt complete, we had a new nurse come on board who didn't know me, and she looked at me like, "What is this white girl doing in this guy's room?" And he turned and he said to her, whatever her name is, said, "Oh, this is my daughter." And that was the first time that I ever heard him acknowledge that relationship out loud. And it just meant so much to me. I told my mom, I got in the car and I just burst into tears. And I sat in that parking lot of that nursing home and just bawled my eyes out. And he's unforgettable, and I know he's here with us. I can feel him here with me now. I haven't lost him. He's just changed forms, and I just feel so blessed to have had this man in my life raising me. I am a better person, and my children are better people because Carl was in my life. Godspeed, Carl.
It is totally one of the kind of a funny little thing, but it's a great thing at the same time. The last photograph of my father taken was with her, and it's so appropriate. that that was the case, because they had a special bond. And it was great for me because I grew up an only child for a long time. And then to discover I have brothers and sisters. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. And they love my father. And I love them. And it's wonderful. Next, the oldest sister, Nancy. Would you come up and say a few words?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I just wanted to share a couple memories also. One of my favorite memories of Carl was when he and Mom got their first house together, and they were going to go get a dog. He was a dog person. He'd always grown up a dog person, and he loved dogs. And they had been to the SPCA. They had found this young German Shepherd there that needed a home, and they were going to go pick her up. So a few of us kids, the brothers and sisters, went to the SPCA to go pick up the dog. And we, the Lambs, had grown up as cat people. We always had cats. And Carl was never a cat person. And so he and Mom are off getting the dog, and all of us went into the cat room, of course. And we're looking at the cats, and we're taking them out of the cage and petting them. And so we're ready to leave, and of course we go home with a dog and a cat. And I still remember him for the first couple of months. He was, darn cat. We don't need no cat. Cats don't belong in the house. Well, before long, this cat was in his lap while he was watching TV, when no one was looking, of course. And he became, over the years, such a cat person. And after that time, I don't ever remember a time when they didn't have a cat. And if you look at some of the photos, you see pictures of him with cat on his lap. And that was his favorite thing when he was watching sports. He'd be sitting there with the Afghan thrown on his lap and a cat or two curled up. And it was one of my very favorite memories. In my late 20s, I had the opportunity to move in with Mom and Carl. I had recently been divorced and had a 1-year-old daughter and needed to get my life back together, and moved in with them for a while. And it was during that time that I actually grew to know the loving and caring person that Carl was. And watching him with my daughter was just an amazing experience. He bonded with her so quickly, and just watching them together. In the mornings when he was eating his breakfast, he'd have his bowl of oatmeal or his cereal, and she'd be there on his lap with a spoon, eating out of his bowl, sharing his breakfast with her. And he really became her father figure. And it was just such amazing memories and such an amazing time. The other thing I remember was the coffee. He would share his coffee with her in the mornings. He would get a cup for her and pour just like a teaspoon of coffee in the cup, fill it with milk, and sit there and share the coffee with her. And he loved his coffee. His favorite coffee was Dunkin' Donuts. He would drive in his red pickup truck that James had mentioned and go to Dunkin' Donuts and get coffee. He'd get up in the morning and Mom would say, "Oh, I made coffee. There's a pot of coffee in the kitchen." "Oh, that's okay." He'd be off to Dunkin' Donuts to go get his coffee. Mom went out and bought Dunkin' Donuts coffee grounds. Thought, okay, I'll make him Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Didn't work. Nope. Still had to go drive to Dunkin' Donuts and get the coffee. was awesome. He'd also drive out every day and get his lottery tickets. That was one thing I remember. James had mentioned that. He'd go play the daily number, and he had to go get his coffee and his tickets. Just loved that. His laugh, I'll never forget his laugh. His laugh absolutely was infectious. And he was one of those people that laughed with his whole body. He didn't just laugh. He laughed with his body and his soul. And you couldn't be in the room with him laughing and not laugh along with him. I'll never forget that. It was just absolutely infectious, and it was a beautiful thing. Sports was absolutely his passion. He loved being involved in Boys and Girls Club, the youth center. He loved watching sports on TV. And I heard a few people, as folks were coming in this afternoon, saying what an impact and what an influence he had on their lives. And it's true. It's everybody that he touched, he had a positive impact on. But by the same token, all of you had such an impact on his life. He was so appreciative to be able to share his time with you. He got so much enjoyment out of that. And I just wanted all of you to know that how much you touched him. We're all so blessed that we got to know him, and he was part of our family. And I just feel so thankful that he was in our lives, and I'll never forget him. Thank you.
What we're going to do, we're going to open this up to friend sharing. I'm going to start with Darlene, who spent some time with him, and she wants to be able to tell you the story. Thank you.
Oh my, all of you pretty much summed up a lot of the things that I wanted to say. One thing I found Carl to be was the epitome of a gentleman. He loved life. He was kind and warm and gentle. He always had something wonderful to say. He always made you feel welcomed and had such a heart for people. And looking at the pictures today, I could see how much he loved his family and his wife and his children and grandchildren, and he just, you could tell he had a life well lived. And unfortunately, I did not get the opportunity to know Carl for 20 or 30 or 50 plus years. I got to know him the last year and a half of his life. But it's the quality of time too that matters sometimes. And I met Carl through his wife, Pauline, who we were realtors together and had a transaction. And she called me a couple years later, and I had fallen ill for a while. And she was, out of the goodness of her heart, she wanted to help me. So for about a year's time, she came and she cooked and she helped me get me back on my feet. And it's really, this is a story of paying it forward. We had, not had contact for a while, and this is just how God's hand works sometimes. And there was a new store I had just started driving, And there was a new store that had opened up, and I wanted to go get some fresh vegetables. And Pauline happened to be there. We ran into each other, and she began to tell me about Carl. And so I told her that I would like to go and see him. And so that very day, I actually went to see him, and he was surprised to see me. And it just began a really year and a half of just talking about heart, matters of the heart. And he was hungry to know the Lord like I knew him, and how I went from my journey of being ill to being better, and he wanted to learn more about that. And so there were many times that we saw the hand of God in our conversations and things that had happened. I just love Carl, and he was like E.F. Hutton. When he spoke, you always wanted to listen. He was such a wise man, but yet gentle in nature, and he was a man of character. He was a confidant, and he was loyal, and he loved his family and friends, and he had such a soul that just he just was a giver. And so many times, in fact every time that we met, the Lord was in the center of our conversations. And one day when I was there, I said, well, Carl, I'm going to start writing 3x5 cards for you to put on your board. I'm going to ask the Lord to lead me. And it was amazing because I opened my Bible, and out popped a 3x5 card, and I don't put 3x5 cards in my Bible. And so I was quite amazed, to be honest, at how this 3x5 card ended up in my Bible. But I said, well, Carl, I guess this is going to be your first one. I said, I didn't even know it was in here. And I remember it because it meant something to me. And it was Matthew 6:33, and it says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And so that was deep. We pondered on that Bible verse for a while, and we spoke about it, and we just began to pray together. And the very first time, that was the very first time I went to see him, that the Bible verse popped out of my Bible. And I began to read the Bible to him, and we prayed together, and something happened that day. I was telling Pauline this a while ago. I've never had it happen to me before, and I've never had it happen to me after, but there was a presence in the room, and I know that it was the Lord. And he began to just fill the room with this amazing presence and love that could only come from him. And Carl and I both felt it. And the amazing thing was, I didn't come back for 2 more weeks. And when he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he said, you're not going to believe what happened. And I said, what happened? He said, remember when we were praying, and he was going through that he was dealing with very high blood pressure, and his diabetes was off the chart, and his kidneys were failing him, and we were praying for these things. And he said, the very next day I went to the doctor, and he said, all the things that we prayed for, he said, my diabetes, it was under the radar. He said, my blood pressure had stabilized. He said, and my kidney numbers were even better. And he said, I want to pray more. And I said, okay, we'll do it. So our journey began that Carl loved to be outside. And when I would come, most of the time he would not be in his room. He would be outside, and it could be 95-degree weather, and he would be out there soaking up the sun rays. And of course, Pauline was so kind, she bought him a hat to make sure, but he loved the sun. And we would sit out there, and we would talk about the Lord, and we would share the Bible, and we would pray together. And this particular day, they were it was kind of like a grouping, and they all came out to, just be out in the fresh sunshine. And Carl and I were kind of at the end, and we had prayed together. And as I was coming back to, go through, I was going home, they stopped me. And there were probably about 10 or 12 patients out there, all in wheelchairs, and they said, "Are you a preacher?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "I just love the Lord." And they said, "Well, would you pray with me?" And that day, I went and prayed with every single person in the wheelchair. And when I laughed, it was very heavy on my heart that there was a genuine need for these people to be uplifted, to be encouraged, to know the love of the Lord. And so out of that birthed a legacy that Carl is leaving behind, because about a year later, in May of 2016, I went to my minister and I asked our pastor if she would please come and have an outreach ministry at Millcroft. And she gladly and wholeheartedly accepted. And not only was it she and her husband, we did communion with the patients. My Sunday school kids would come and sing for Carl and all the patients. And sometimes when the patients couldn't get out of their rooms, my Sunday school kids, we would go and my pastor and I would pray with the patients and they would sing for them. And you could tell that it made such a significant difference. And they look forward to the first Sunday of every month. And during these times that we were there, Carl had came twice. And he actually he was putting the Lord first, because he wanted to watch some football games or some things, and James would bring him up. In fact, every time I went there, practically James was there and was bringing coffee or goodies to him, and he just loved James so much and talked so highly about you and his family and his son. And so he gave praise in two of those messages, and one was he gave praise for the Lord healing him of diabetes, and he did this in front of everyone, and there was about 35 people there, and he spoke about how the Lord had healed him of diabetes, and we just kind of looked at each other and smiled because we knew when it was. And then the very next time, I think it was around October, he gave praise for the new addition to his family, Michael's son, Leland. And he was so excited. And so it's just, Carl has left an everlasting impression on my heart. I miss him greatly, as I'm sure all of you do. But he lived his life well, and he was happy. And it did my heart good to spend time with him and comfort him with the words of our Father. And we talked a lot about heaven. And he knew and he understood and he wanted that. And he definitely believed. And I know that our loved one is in heaven. And I know that he's celebrating up there just as we're celebrating today down here, that his spirit is with us. I truly believe that. And his deepest desire, we shared a lot of matters of the heart, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing this because most of you probably know. He said that his deepest desire was to be healed and to go home. And I can honestly say that the Lord answered his prayer. He took him to the ultimate home. Amen. And we have the promise as believers in his Son, Jesus Christ, that we will see each other again. And we will celebrate together again. And so I just thank you. I thank you, Pauline, for bringing me into your life, for you coming and helping me through a difficult time. And it was my pleasure to get to know your husband and to we blessed each other with our friendship. And I just thank you so much. And Carl, we love you. There was a couple Bible verses that meant a lot to Carl. And again, I did not just choose these Bible verses. I prayed about them diligently. And one of the Bible verses that he loved was in your brochures, your pamphlets. And another one was, I would read to him to comfort him sometimes, John 14:1-6. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read that. And I hope that you're comforted by these words too. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Thomas, his disciple, said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Amen.
Okay, right now, what I want to do is we're going to open this up to family or friends. And what I would like you to do, if you want to say a few words, please come up and kind of line yourselves right up along here so we can make this as quick as possible. Anybody want to say a few words?
All right, hi everybody. My name is Matt Evans. Grew up media, and anybody who grew up media obviously knew Carl, Mr. Boston, as I still refer to him to this day. You know, Mr. Boston is still alive today. Before I came up here, I was at Rose Street Field. You know, and all those memories came flooding back to me. You know, Rose Street Colts, media, Little League, the Boys Club, and I see my friends here. You know, his legacy still lives today when I see my friends, the Johnsons here. And guys that have taken over the community reins, and now they're the ones coaching, and they're the ones, you know, being involved in these things. That's because of people like Carl. You know, they gave us a sense of giving back. And real quick story, and I'll get done here. Played for the Rose Street Colts, and it was our championship year. We had a game at Westbrook Park. It was pouring, and they were like the big rival. That was going to be the one challenge game we had. We went on to win the championship, but it was pouring. It's like nighttime. I never remember being that dark in the day. The other team standing under a canopy, staying nice and dry, and we, Rose Street Colts, were getting soaking wet. Getting a little doubtful maybe about this game. And Carl gave this talk. I don't know what he said, but he whipped us into such a frenzy that, pardon my language, and them poor bastards never had a chance against us. So, you know, he had a way of revving you up and making you play beyond your level, you know, just by his inspiration. So again, my condolences to the family, and Carl will never be forgotten. He was a man who was greatly loved in our community. And he was also the Media Old Timers 1980 Warren Yoon Sportsman of the Year Award, which is the highest honor in the media area for sports, so I just wanted to pass that along. So again, my condolences, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Tony Johnson, I'm Jumbo's son. So I got a lot of stories. I'll try to not be too long, but him and my father, everybody knows how close they were.
Amen.
I met him, well, about 8 years old, Rose Street Colts. My father was the Gopher coaching. My father was, at that time, had the 70-pounders. Mr. Boston had the 115s. And I was, even that age, I probably was, everybody used to call me Bones, I probably was about 30 pounds. I really didn't want to play football, but everybody was playing because I was so, you know, skinny. You know, now you look at me like, really? You know, and I came off, the practice was over, and we were going, you had to run the hills. So we were running a little hill, and my father used to park right there. So I was crying, you know, after the practice. I'm like, I don't know if I could do this. You know, 30 pounds, soaking wet. Everybody's at 70 or a little bit over 70 pounds. So they got a 40 pounds difference. And we got tough kids back then. Wally Packer, Glenn Gorshin, you know, Bruce Scott, crazy Kevin Nicholson. So I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. So Mr. Boston saw me crying. I was trying to hide from my father. I didn't want to cry in front of him. And he said, look, and he's the first one made the saying about the dog and, you know, the fight in the dog and the bark. I don't remember how that go, but everybody knows how that go. But he said that to me. It's not the size, you know, in that fight, you know, in the bark, whatever, how that go. But that convinced me to, you know, continue to keep playing. So I finished playing, you know, all the way up to high school. So I was, you know, he was definitely a good motivator. Everybody in here that knows that plays sports or played under him, that was his big thing, it was to motivate you. Get you playing better than what you thought you were or that team was. Even though they had a lot of good teams, Mr. Scala, you know, guys that played under them guys, Jerry Benson, they were, I mean, real good teams. But remember, the 3 championships, each year we had to play, the other leagues were heavier and the kids were a year older. So during the season, we played everybody our age and our weight, but when it came to the championship, when we crossed and went to the Brigantine or wherever we went, Natchez or Atlantic City Convention Center, we always had to play the bigger and older kids, and that's when he really would fire us up. And we go out there and we won. I don't think we lost a championship, Belt championship ever.
I don't think so.
You know, if everybody can remember, I don't think we lost ever. So he made us women and men. I mean, when he came up, the boys club, and my father took over in 1972, it was challenging times then because, you know, my father was the first African American to run the boys club in media. So it was a lot of challenges. You know, you're coming off the, you know, the 60s, but him and Mr. Boston, they didn't see color. If you remember, we all were together. There wasn't no black or no white. I mean, when we went to tournaments, if it was a white parent, you might have 5 black kids in that car with the white parent's child, and vice versa. Because we didn't care, we just jumped in the car. Because everybody, we didn't see color. We wasn't, I mean, media was special. And when we went to Aston, when we went to Claymont or Plymouth, they saw how close this community was because of men like, you know, Mr. Boston. You know, sometimes they were jealous. I mean, we didn't get we didn't get calls because of that, our closeness within our community. You know, they were jealous because, you know, the blacks and the whites we could get, you know, were together. There was no difference. I mean, we played for years and we can see each other now and we're all family. Because of Mr. Boston and other men like Mr. Scala, John, my father, they just didn't see that. They were making us men. And for the women, if they put with the softball, they make you young ladies. And that's what they stood for. I mean, he was no nonsense, you know, but he was caring. I mean, you heard that from other people. And I got it, you know, I couldn't get away from him or my father. I mean, there was a story one time, my first year coaching Teener, and I'm young myself, because they got me coaching and reffing. Me and my brother, we were like 16, reffing 12-year-olds, the A-League. So we started out young coaching and reffing. And I picked a team one year, and it was my first Teener League team, and we split. You get one coach got 10 and the other coach got 10. So my team had like 8 African American, you know, young boys, and my father pulled me in the office. It was 10, 8 and 2. But I didn't see color. I just was picking the team. So he pulled me in the office. He said, the other team got all white kids. You got all black kids. Why'd you do that? And I didn't know. I picked the best team. So Mr. Boston came in. He said to my father, he said, look, you said it in the beginning, you know what I mean, it doesn't matter